All right, hello everybody. I'm going to continue with the topic of conflict, although this is a little bit more concrete. And I'm going to talk about two projects we've done in the center, one around Aleppo and another one around Colombia. So I work at the Center for Spatial Research at Columbia University, and even though we're a center that's located in the architecture school, we collaborate a lot with the humanities. We got a generous grant from the Mellon Foundation, and we teach seminars on conflict urbanism, language urbanism. Right now we're teaching one about infrapolitics, which is how infrastructure plays a role with politics, how it's appropriated for political reasons, or how it determines political outcomes. And we also teach introductory courses to students from architecture, but also from the humanities. So we teach Introduction to Mapping and Introduction to Data Visualization. We also do research projects, and I'm going to talk about two of them. The idea with these projects is to try to, through mapping and data visualization, understand conflict. And conflict, we speak about it in a very broad sense. These two projects are about conflict specifically, how we understand it usually, war, displacement, destruction, homicides. But we also talk about conflict as an agent for redefining cities or rebuilding cities or the interaction between different groups in cities. So first, Conflict Urbanism Colombia. So just to give you a brief background on what's going on in Colombia right now, after more than 50 years of war, the government finally signed a peace process with the guerrillas of the FARC. These were Marxist-Leninist guerrillas. However, that agreement was put forward to a referendum, and the people of Colombia voted it down. So it was one of those referendums that happened last year that was very surprising to everybody. Everybody thought the peace process was going to get approved by a great majority, and it was not. The government worked very fast with the guerrilla group. The Nobel Committee gave the president of Colombia the Nobel Peace Prize, after the peace agreement was rejected, as a sort of a demonstration of support. And finally, through the legislature, the agreement was passed without another referendum. So it's a very old war. It's been going on for more than 50 years. It started with peasant guerrillas, and it grew exponentially this is a photograph taken during the 1980s. There were more than 5 guerrilla groups. This is one of those moments where the leaders of all the guerrilla groups got together to form a cohesive strategy. All of that was fueled or was in opposition or working with the drug trade. So that's Pablo Escobar and one of his infamous bombings of an airplane. And on top of that, you have massive groups of paramilitaries fighting with the drug dealers, against the guerrillas, with the state, against the state. So this is a very, very complex relationship and conflict. In the middle of the peace process with the paramilitaries, which happened in 2005, the government decided to create or to assemble a huge data set of victims of the Colombian conflict. As of February 2016, because this data set is still being updated, the data set contained more than 8 million victims, of which there were more than 6.9 million displacements, 260,000 homicides, 300,000 threats, 40,000 disappearances, so on and so forth. And we got access to this data set. So the idea with the Colombia project, and it's totally different than the Aleppo project that I'm going to show in a bit, is to explore the conflict through one massive data set, is to just really dive into this data set and look at it from multiple perspectives. So this data set is publicly available, actually. You can look it up, you can download it, not at the resolution at which we have it. We have it at an individual level. We have every single record without personal identifiers, of course. But you can access the aggregated data set. And so the first step, of course, was to map it. This is forced displacement from 1985 to 2015. The orange parts of the lines are the points of arrival. The white parts of the line are the points of departure. and the thickness of the line represents the number of people who were displaced. And it's accompanied by a series of, satellite imageries that we use to sort of depict the diversity of the terrain and the diversity of the locations that were affected by the war. So the idea was to really give an overview of displacement according to this data set, but also pointing out that the country is very diverse and displacement has occurred throughout the whole country. This is a zoom in to the Atlantic coast, so Cartagena, Barranquilla, and Santa Marta, and you see all the displacement that arrived at those locations. And these are satellite images of some of those municipalities. This is a zoom in of the southern part of the country, and these are images of those municipalities. So you see how different they are. These are coastal or mountainous municipalities, but with dense jungle and with a lot of rivers, and the previous ones were more arid, still mountainous, but without that much vegetation. And the first product that we got from this project was a 2 meters by 2 meters print of this map with a couple of video animations. And this was exhibited in the Oslo Architectural Triennale, which was a weird venue for this kind of project, but they really wanted to expand what architecture means, and their theme was after belonging. So it was a lot about displacement. The next phase of this project was to build an interactive website, which I will show you right now, which is this one, which combines what we had produced and expands it a little bit. So first of all, we have a similar map showing displacement, but the idea with this one is that it's interactive, so you can zoom in and pan around, of course, but you can also select individual municipalities and see only the people that were displaced to and from those municipalities. And you can see the people who were displaced to that municipality or from that municipality. In the case of Medellin, you see how complex the conflict is. It's not only that people are going to the large cities, but they're also leaving from them. And there are a lot of people who are displaced within the same city. That is particularly extreme in the case of Buenaventura, which has that thick connection to Bogota, but Buenaventura has also seen more than 150,000 people displaced within the same city. And that has happened in the last 5 years or so. With the same data set, so just still dealing with displacement, we created this video animation. Just play. And the idea with this animation was to show every single victim as one particle going from origin to destination. We really wanted to profit from the fine-grained level of this data set and to show a more dynamic view of the conflict. It starts in 1985 and it moves to 2015. And here we start seeing, sorry for the resolution, the internet is not helping too much, but if you take a look at it later on, you will see that every 1st of January, there's a little spike in activity. And so this is one of the things that came out of the visualization, and then we started investigating, and it wasn't that there were more displacements the 1st of January. It was just that the people that didn't report an exact date, but reported a year, got all lumped into the 1st of January. So one of the very important things about this data set is that it's self-reported, right? So it's victims that go and say, I was the victim of displacement. My husband was murdered. My daughter was raped. And so it's great. It contains a lot of super valuable information, but it has, of course, its own biases. How was the data collected? Where did the government officials go to? Did the victims have incentives to report the crimes? Apparently they did, but there were other problems. So all of this is explored here, and you can see how, as time passes by, the activity gets much stronger. The other piece of the project was a data visualization in which we visualize 200,000 victims, a random sample, into little pixels. And I just want to show you, if we sort this by the date in which the crime was reported, and it's colored by the type of crime, you see these very strong breaks. So orange is displacement, teal is homicide. So you see how the government, or there was some kind of concrete effort to collect more data about homicides in that moment. So this reveals sort of the inherent biases in the data set. All right, very fast. I'm going to switch to here again. I'm going to skip a little bit. This is just screenshots from the website. And I'm going to switch to Aleppo. Aleppo has sort of the complete different perspective. It's a project in which we had no data set. So we had to assemble data from multiple sources. Right? So the first thing we did is we created a series of base maps with OpenStreetMap data, but also with high-resolution satellite imagery. Right? And when you zoom into the high-resolution satellite imagery from 2012, for example, just get rid of the neighborhoods. You can see this is the Citadel. This is a very important archaeological site in Aleppo. It hasn't been destroyed yet, but when you move forward, you see the destruction, right? You see it, this part, especially heavily bombarded and gets completely destroyed. And you can see that as time progresses, more and more buildings get shelled and get destroyed. So we were trying to pull this data from high-resolution satellite image. However, as you all know, it's very expensive to acquire high-resolution satellite image, and you cannot do it systematically. So the next part was to attempt to do something similar with Landsat. Now, the resolution is completely different. So with the help of remote data scientist Jaemon van der Hoek, he helped us develop this algorithm that would try to identify significant change in pixel value. So this is an image, a Landsat image. These are sort of the selected areas. These are the two overviews. And you see the areas in yellow are the pixels where the algorithm detected significant change. So something happened there. And then we went into the high-resolution imagery. We overlaid the areas that we selected. And indeed, it was destroyed by bombing. Now, the algorithm is not perfect. There's a lot of noise, but it was just sort of a proof of concept to understand how we can create data set from these different sources. The last step was work that some students did in which they looked at YouTube videos. So they gathered thousands of YouTube videos around Aleppo that were tagged with a specific neighborhood and put them on a map. So we can then go and double check those things that we saw in the satellite imagery with citizen reporting through the YouTube videos. Now, of course, the YouTube videos also have a bias, also have credibility problems, but this is something we're sort of aggregating data from multiple sources to create a repository, an archive of destruction. So these are the two projects we've been working on, and I'm happy to answer questions. Oh, this is not mine. Sorry. Where is mine? Well, all right, sorry, whatever. I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Juan. Do we have any? Sorry. Oh, do we have any questions?
Back.
In the back. I really get my exercise on this way. Can't ride my bike now anyway, so.
Thank you so much for that talk. I've seen the Aleppo example at AG, but it was really great to see the Colombia example as well. So I was really intrigued by what you said about depicting people as particles. And so I was wondering if you could speak more to the design decisions, and especially in a collaborative environment, of depicting people either as flow lines, particles, aggregated groups. I just wanted, if you could just speak a little more to that.
Yeah, I know that it's a very controversial thing. You usually don't want to represent each individual person and not as a line or particle. You don't want to simplify it that much. You don't want these very basic figures to represent all the complexity and all the stories around the victims. But in this specific case, we really wanted to profit from the fact that we had individual records, that we could say this is a female that's part of an indigenous community whose husband was the victim of displacement. So we really wanted to get at that fine grain to sort of uncover detailed histories of the victims of the conflict. We didn't want to just look at it from a macro level. We were not trying to say anything representative of the conflict. We know that the data set is not necessarily representative because it's self-reported data, but we do value the individual records that are there, so we do want to provide a window into those individual records. So that was the idea. Mm-hmm.
I think we have time for one more question. Does anybody want to ask more?
Yes, thanks. What now? I mean, you've looked at Aleppo, you've looked at Colombia, two very different places, both in terms of geography and size and scale and all that. How are you looking to analyze conflict?
So the Colombia project has a couple of other chapters that I didn't have time to go over. One of them is looking at the data through the lens of network analysis. So trying to bring a type of analysis that's not usually applied to this type of data to see what it can tell us. What communities are more central in this network? Can we detect groups of communities that are more connected than others? So that was one specific part for the Colombia project. But we're winding it down and we're moving more towards we're teaching this class about infrastructure and mapping infrastructure and how infrastructure affects politics and how politics affect infrastructure. So we're trying to build a platform where you can compare cities based on infrastructure and the ways infrastructure has been used for or by political movements. So we're sort of switching out from war, going into more of a sort of political activism in cities through the physical environment. All right, thank you.
And thank you.